Jesus can forgive your sin. If you turn around and trust in Him, the old has passed away, the new begins. But only Jesus can forgive your sin.
Welcome to the Walking Through the Gospel video teaching series. My name is Bill Itzel. This is my son Ryan. And you may be asking yourself the question, why in the world would I listen to these two people talk about the gospel? Well, the reason is because that's what we do. Ryan is a missionary with Open Air Campaigners, and so he is a full-time missionary that goes out on the street and preaches the gospel. I am a singer-songwriter, worship leader who also goes out on the streets. And so 4 days a week, we're out talking to people and giving them the gospel. So we'd like to share with you why we go out and do that. We'd like to share with you how, some of the techniques we use, where we go and give the gospel. But we'd like to start with probably one of the most important things in the gospel, and that is, what is the gospel? If you ask most believers, and we do this on the street quite a bit, people who claim to be believers, and we believe many of them are, explain to me what is the gospel. It's hard to put into words and make sure you get it right. And so we break it down into 4 questions. Who is God? Who is man? Who is Jesus? And what is our response? Because you have to get those 4 right in order to get the gospel right. So we're going to start with, who is God? Now, we are going to try to wrap this up in about 5 minutes. And so trying to explain the entire essence of God in 5 minutes is a ridiculous proposition. But we're going to focus really on the elements of who God is in relation to the gospel. The things that are very important to set the stage for who man is and who Jesus is. So when we start with who is God, where do we start, Ryan?
You know, when I like to share the gospel with people, I like to begin with where the Bible begins. And so the Bible begins in Genesis chapter 1 by making that awesome declaration that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What this speaks to is the reality that, as John puts forth in John chapter 1, all things were made by Him and for Him, and without Him nothing was made that has been made. There's not a single thing, whether it be visible, invisible, or whatever it may be, that has been made or brought into existence that did not come into existence apart from God. He is the one who created, who brought all things into being. And even as it speaks in Revelation, God is praised in heaven in chapters 4 and 5. And one of the things that He's praised for is the fact that He willed and all things were created and they exist. So God is the creator of all things. But when we speak to Him being the creator, we're not just explaining where everything came from, though the Bible gives that explanation, but we're also explaining why our world continues to sustain in the way that it is today. And that's because there is a sustainer. As the creator, He's the one who upholds the universe by the word of His power. As Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3 states, He's the maker of this world. He upholds this world. But the Bible also teaches that He owns this world. As creator, it's a reminder that this is God's world and He has the right to it. Listen to what Psalm 24:1 says. The earth is Yahweh's, as well as its fullness, the world and those who dwell in it. All that is in this world is made by God, it's sustained by God, and it is owned by God.
Yeah, one of the things that amazes me most when we go out on the streets is the number of people, the percentage of people who understand that there is a creator. You would think with the constant bombardment of evolution and the constant bombardment and teaching of that everybody grows up in, thinking that there is no God, that all of this is just random chance and that nobody acted upon nothing to create everything. Most people, I think, in their heart, realize that that's nonsense. Realize that there must be someone that they're going to be accountable to. Now, who that is, it varies, but most people understand that, so we don't have a very difficult time usually in laying the foundation of that there is a God.
No, the scriptures even declare that in Romans chapter 1, that he's made evident to him, to man, his existence, his eternal power and his divine nature.
Mm-hmm.
These things are clearly perceived, and the only reason people choose or block those things out is based on a man's desire to not be held accountable by God.
Right.
And the blindness of our own hearts, where people may even genuinely reject the idea of God, but it's due to the blindness of our own hearts as the God of this world continues to blind the heart that is already darkened in its understanding.
And if the idea that there is a creator God begins to separate God and man, because we realize he's the creator, we're the creation, then the idea of God's holiness expands on that, because when you rightly see God in his holiness, then it begins to put man in his rightful place. So talk to us a little bit about God's holiness and what God demands of us in terms of holiness.
Yeah. So holiness, one of my seminary professors described it in 3 different categories. One, there's the intrinsic holiness, which is the intrinsic holiness of God, as we'll look at in just a moment. It's what we're talking about here. But there's also consecrated holiness that we see in the scriptures, where places or things or even people are set apart by God for the service and worship of God. You can think of the ground that Moses stood on as he met with Yahweh at the burning bush. Right? God says to remove his sandals because this is holy ground. It's not that it was intrinsically pure in and of itself, but rather it was a place that God set apart to meet with Moses for God's purpose. Then there's the reflective holiness, which is what God calls us to be, as the scriptures declare in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 15 and 16, that we're to be holy as God is holy, as we're to reflect, just as the moon reflects the light of the sun, we're called to reflect the holiness of God. But that initial one, the intrinsic holiness of God, it speaks of God's white-hot, unchangeable purity, as there's nothing in God that one can be tainted or corrupted, as even the scriptures declare in James chapter 1, as every good gift comes down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. He can't be corrupted, but he is perfectly good. So he not only cannot do what is wrong, but he also only does that which is right. The scriptures declare it in Psalm 119, verse 68, that you are good and you do good. Teach us your statutes. That is who God is in and of himself. He's not like us, the created being. So he's set apart in that sense, but he is also perfectly pure before there was anything to be set apart from. He was always holy, eternally holy, as he never does what is wrong and only does that which is right.
So how good do we need to be in order to get to a holy God?
Yeah, well, that leads into the next reality about who God is, because God's standard, as he is the holy God, is perfection. In fact, that's exactly what Jesus said as he was talking in Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. He's talking about entering the kingdom of heaven. Well, he explains the depth of that standard, or the height of that standard, you might say, in verse 48, where he says, therefore you must be perfect as our heavenly Father is perfect.
There's a problem there.
Exactly. God's standard is himself. It is that we would meet his standard. And the reality is that those who do not, justice is what finds them.
Yeah, we ask the question often, have you ever told a lie? Even a lie. And everybody admits that they've told a lie. And if they don't admit they've told a lie, they're lying right then. Mm-hmm. So everyone admits that they've broken God's standard. And that puts us in a really bad spot. So to recap, we see that God is the creator, we see that God is holy, and we see that God is just. Now, there is so much more to know about God, and it is very vital, I think, to know more about God than just those 3 things, because you will get questions. We get questions all the time that come out of left field that you need to have a good idea of theology proper or the study of God, the Father, to really understand and to be able to answer those questions. But if you can get those 3 things right, that God is creator, that God is holy, and that God is just, it puts God in his rightful place, because the next question, which we will deal with in the next video, is who is man?